So let us start the second session. Our another panelists are here for the second session. Moderator is Mr. Mosharraf Zaidi. He is also CPG member. And our first panelist is Pakistan's former Chief of Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Sohail Aman Saab. Our second panelist is Naeem. He's defense analyst and also served as the Caretaker Defense Minister for Pakistan in 2018. Our third panelist is Andleeb Abbas. He's the Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs, Government of Pakistan. Fourth panelist is Senator Anwar Kakar. He's member, Senate of Pakistan, and Ambassador Riaz Khokhar. He is Pakistan's former Foreign Secretary. He has also served as Ambassador in the United States of America, China, India, and Bangladesh. Very rich panel, very powerful panel. And our moderator is CPGN Mosharraf Zaidi. So all of them are members of Corporate Pakistan Group as well, and the topic is Pakistan's options in evolving geopolitical situation. So Mosharraf is in waiting, I think, and also Air Marshal Sohail Aman Saab. So this conference is live on Facebook page and YouTube channel of Nutshell Group. And from all over the world, from different countries, individuals are attending this conference, including the Pakistani diaspora and also the different nationalities who are interested in this issue of Afghanistan. So, आप इसको start करवा दें, इसी session को start करवा दें. मुशर्रफ ज़ैदी को इन कर दें, and also Sohail Aman साहब. Some technical glitches, but also this is a blessing also, technology, because within 6 days short notice we are hosting this conference while sitting in our homes, and we are connecting with the world, and there is a need to portray Pakistan's narrative all over the world, what Pakistan's foreign ministry is doing. Currently Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi is on his visit to Central Asian countries. This is testing time for the region, and inshallah together with as United nation with committed nation, we will handle and manage these challenges very well. So let me request Ms. Andleeb Abbas, Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs, to please start from her opening remarks. The format is that Mosharraf Zaidi is the moderator. He's joining us in a few minutes. So every one of you will start with 3 to 4 minutes opening remarks, followed by question answers with Mosharraf Zaidi. Over to you, Andleeb.
Thank you so much, Asfar, and it's great that so many august and experts and leaders and excellencies are here to talk about the most important topic, I think, in the world today, and that is Afghanistan. This is a truly historical moment for the world, and I think for the region in particular. And as they say that when things happen like this, they present opportunities and threats both, depending on how you receive them and how you act upon them. So Afghanistan, as you know, has been a melting hotspot in the geopolitical world. And as Sheikh Mazari and Sharif Aman have very expansively talked about the situation, I'm not going to go over it. I'm just going to give an overview of how in foreign affairs, in the foreign ministry, and as government of Pakistan, we are approaching this particular situation. We have a four-pronged approach towards the region and Afghanistan in particular. Our first approach is that we are partners in peace. This is a stated policy for us, and we have been stating it for a long period of time. Our Prime Minister has categorically said that this is what our whole focus is in Afghanistan and in the region in particular. So that is why when you saw the Absolutely Not interview that was in line with this policy, that we are not going to be partners in conflict. We were, and we suffered the most. And we are not going to repeat the mistakes we made previously. So we are partners in peace, and we are going to do our utmost to promote peace in the region, especially in Afghanistan. Because if Afghanistan is peaceful, Pakistan is peaceful. Pakistan has paid a heavy price of the conflict that has taken place in Afghanistan. So that's the first approach. The second one is that we are going to support an inclusive, sustainable government in Afghanistan. And we are very clear on it, because we have seen that whenever it is not inclusive, it is not sustainable. It comes, people change after 3 years, and it goes back to being in conflict, and in a huge conflict, even greater conflict than before. So we are supporting stakeholder dialogue everywhere. As you saw, there was a particular delegation which came on a few days before the takeover in Kabul, and it represented multiple stakeholders over there with whom we are talking. Our ambassador over there is talking to the ex-presidents of Afghanistan, all in an effort to bring everybody to the table and do a dialogue, which has been the Prime Minister Imran Khan's policy. Even 20 years ago, he was the lone voice who said that dialogue is the only solution. Military solutions are never sustainable. Number 3, we are very conscious about the humanitarian issues that Afghanistan is facing. And our embassy and our government is doing everything in this period, which is uncertain, where people are evacuating, where other embassies are closed now. Our embassies are working day-night to make it possible for people who want to leave the country and to be safe and sound as far as this period of transition is concerned. And last but not the least, our government has shifted from geopolitics to geoeconomics. Very clearly, as a policy, as a foreign policy, as a trade policy, we have said that we want to bring the region together, not through just political means, but more through economic means, because this is a golden trade corridor. And let me say that in the 80s, it was the Southeast Asian nations which were supposed to be the Asian tigers. And Pakistan has a vision that now in the 2001 and 2021, 24, 25, it is going to be the South Central Asian nations which are going to go up. So peace in Afghanistan will mean a corridor where train, railway networks will create a market bigger than the European Union. So that is the four-pronged approach that we are following. And we are happy to see that the bloodshed that was expected has not happened, but we are very sensitive and we are keeping a watch on everything, giving the perspective that things are still unfolding as we talk.
And over to you, Mosharraf. Mosharraf is here now, and all the panelists are here. I am grateful to all of you on behalf of Corporate Pakistan Group. And Mosharraf, over to you. Andleeb already covered her opening remarks. Please.
I'm grateful. First of all, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and salam to everyone watching, and a special salam to the fantastic panel. I think it's a real credit to Asfar and his ingenuity and his leadership that he's been able to mobilize such a fantastic group so quickly.
Naeem, Khalid, Lodhi.
Am I audible? I'm Naeem Lodhi.
Yes, you are audible, sir. You are audible.
Because there's a lot of distortion.
There is a issue with Mosharraf, so let's ask Marshal for his remarks.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay, perfect. I think as per very good job done. Like everybody said, and I'm sure that the policy guidelines would eventually be made out of this huge effort and put up to the government so that they can take the rich space from here. I just want to make 2 or 3 points. And this is not about what happened. We all know what has happened. But what's really interesting to see that there are two different kind of strategies in the world which have happened. One is the West and United States, and one is the East, the China. A slow, progressive. I remember going out to Africa about 2 decades ago, and the Chinese would go do mining, but still make small schools and the hospitals, and then they took on the BRI. And look at this approach, vis-a-vis being the unipolar world. America decided to handle everything by force, and then it's not sustainable. We saw it because the people-to-people contact was not there. The investment in the people's well-being was not there, and then you make a military which is not motivated and which does not have that loyalty. Everything crumbled because of these reasons. Now, it's very important for United States to look back and see right from the World War II to so many. I don't have to quote numerous. But if we spend trillions of dollars, and I think not less than 7 to 8 million people killed, this is not fair. Where is it going to go from here? If the United States realizes and alters the course, if it does, that's something very positive. But if it is a situation where this is taken as a defeat, which is taken as a situation where there's supposed to be a reaction to it, and of course, please realize that this space is going to be fed up by the regional activity. Whether it is the crossroad of the trade or influence. So America will feel left out, and it will be very important for us in Pakistan to watch out for the stability both in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And of course, India has its own turns to the whole thing. So I think we are into a very important place where the two kinds of approaches to the world have become visible. Media management or the perception management will come in. I mean, why should they be talking of girls going to the school or not going to the school? I think Taliban have played their innings pretty good. I think we need to give that credit to them to start with. I mean, just being less than a week. And they made it very clear in an amnesty. Girls participating into the school activity, the women role into the parliament. What else do we expect them to exactly do? So I think we'll have to watch out very carefully. One more small point, that myth of democracy. Democratic system may be the best system, but they're not the only systems in the world. Chinese have a system that's worked fine. Africans have their own system that work fine. So I think it's a golden opportunity for Taliban to show an Islamic ideological system if it can work effectively. So I think I would call this an hour of cautious hope, while we in Pakistan must support and not intervene and not interfere, and to let Taliban settle down to what they are. They've done a big job. I mean, making sure in the last 6 months that they were coordinating with so many agencies, and of course, a peaceful go-through did take place. And we saw that happen, both military and the Northern Alliance, Tajiks, and rest of the people. My last point here is that Afghans and the region stands at the most critical time in the history. There's a big opportunity here. China and Russia there to make sure that Afghans, they may not have an industry, but they can become an excellent trade corridor. And not only the Central Asian republics out to the Gwadar. Look at where Gwadar opens to the Gulf of Hormuz, out to the west, and of course the Strait of Malacca to the onto the east side. So I think it's a big opportunity for Afghans and the region to realize a regional approach which can really work wonders to the whole thing. We in Pakistan must watch out for our own security. Indians are taken care of in case of some mischief on their side, which they've usually done. And we must support Afghans to stabilize into a broad-based and all-inclusive government. It will be only then that their governance will come into play, and they'll have to improve their economy to bring prosperity to their people. And inshallah, that will happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sohail Saab. Mosharraf, Salim Safi is also here. So if you will engage him also in this panel discussion and continue from here now, please.
Zabardast, thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulty. We've had the chance to hear from Madam Andleeb Abbas, who laid out the government's approach on this. I think a lot of credit has been given to the government, and more should be given for especially the last 6 months or so. There's been some incredible work that has gone into the Doha peace process from the Pakistani perspective. It was also interesting to hear former Air Chief Marshal Sohail Aman's views, some of which surprised me, and I'll come back to what surprised me, and perhaps we can talk more about that. I also had some specific questions for, of course, former Foreign Secretary and Ambassador Riaz Khokhar, who's part of this group, Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodhi, former Caretaker Defense Minister. He's part of this group, and so I'll come to him with some questions. And of course, my dear brother and friend, Senator Anwar Kakar, I'm going to come to him last because I think that the voice from Balochistan should have the longest. I didn't know Salim was part of the panel, but let's go to Salim. And Salim bhai, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how you see the perspective, a lot of perspectives, especially of many senior officials, former senior officials, like Air Chief Marshal Saab, are cautiously optimistic. Some other folks in Pakistan and abroad are less optimistic. आप बताएं आपकी क्या कैफियत है? आप optimistic हैं या आपको लगता है कि 4 साल जो हुकूमत का मौका मिला था तालिबान को, उसमें हमें काफी जो झलक है या जो प्रूफ है कि तालिबान क्या है क्या नहीं है वो मिल गया था? सलीम साफी साहब।
मुशर्रफ, थैंक यू वेरी मच। और पहले तो मैं माजरत करूंगा क्योंकि मैं उर्दू में ही बोलने वाला हूं और टाट वाला हूं और टाट स्कूल वाला हूं। जो मेरी तालिब इल्माना राय है, एक तो इस दौरान मेरी गुफ्तगू हुई जो अभी अफ़गानिस्तान से जो शमाल की क़यादत आई थी, तो यूनुस कानूनी और करीम खलीली, अहमद ज़िया मसूद, उन सब से बातचीत हुई। अफ़गानिस्तान में जो सोर्सेज़ हैं, यार दोस्त हैं, उनसे भी बातचीत होती रहती है। और अभी मैं जो चाइना के स्पेशल एनवॉय है अफ़गानिस्तान के लिए, उनसे मिल के आ रहा हूँ। तो जो मजमूई खाका मेरे जहन में बनता है, तो दोनों इम्कानात हैं, हालात के मज़ीद ख़राब होने का या पाकिस्तान की आजमाइशों के मज़ीद बढ़ने का। और इम्कानात अफ़गानिस्तान में पीस के भी हैं और हो सकता है पाकिस्तान की मुश्किलात की कमी के भी हैं, लेकिन मजमूई तौर पर मेरे जहन में परेशानी और ख़दशात का जो पलड़ा है वो भारी है। और पाकिस्तान के अंदर भी हमें दो तरह के ट्रेंड्स
वो ठीक है, लेकिन वो बार-बार कट रहा है, तो फिर मैं दोबारा ट्राई कर रहा हूँ, फिर मैं आ रहा हूँ, तो दरमियान में फिर मसला
सॉरी सलीम, ये अपना जनरल साहब, हाँ, अगर बाकी सबको हम म्यूट कर दें, सलीम अपनी बात पूरी कर लें, एंड देन I'll come to everyone इंशाल्लाह। प्लीज सलीम भाई कंटिन्यू। आपने अपना उर्दू इस्तेमाल पे आपने माजरत नहीं करनी थी, ये बहुत बुरा लगता है। आप प्लीज बात
नहीं, वो इसलिए बहरहाल हमें तो प्राउड होना चाहिए, और मेरी तो उर्दू भी कुछ पश्तो-नमा उर्दू होती है, लेकिन भी के पाकिस्तानी हम उर्दू बोलते हुए प्राउड फील करते हैं। लेकिन मैं चूंकि बाकी सारे लोग अंग्रेजी में था मजमूई तौर प्रोग्राम, तो उस हवाले से मैंने माजरत की। मैं ये कह रहा था कि पाकिस्तान में हमें दो ट्रेंड्स नजर आते हैं।
सलीम भाई, हम सिर्फ इसमें इसलिए बात कर रहे थे कि द कॉन्फ्रेंस वाज काइंड ऑफ इंटरनेशनल कॉन्फ्रेंस, लॉट ऑफ पीपल, बना उर्दू से इतनी मोहब्बत, इतनी आपको। जी,
आई कैन अंडरस्टैंड जी। तो
and I'll continue to just to clarify, Air Chief Marshal Saab, that wasn't a slight on you or anybody else. I'll continue to speak in English.
I fully understand that, yeah.
जी। बिस्मिल्लाह सलीम भाई, प्लीज कंटिन्यू।
जी, तो मैं ये अर्ज कर रहा था कि पाकिस्तान में हमें दो ट्रेंड्स नज़र आते हैं, एक जुबिलेशन की और जश्न की। और कुछ जो हमारे कौम परस्त हल्के हैं, तो उनके यहाँ पख्तून नेशनलिस्ट, उनके यहाँ कुछ मातम की सी कैफियत नज़र आती है। मेरे नज़दीक ये दोनों बिलाजवाज़ हैं, और ना तो हमें जश्न मनाना चाहिए और ना हमें जो है मातम करना चाहिए। अब पहली बात ये कि हम अगर कहते हैं कि भाई अफ़गान लेड अफ़गान ओन, तो फिर अगर हम खुशी किसी एक फरीक की फतह पे मनाते हैं तो भी वो हमें फरीक बनाता है, और अगर हम मातम करते हैं तो वो भी हमें फरीक बनाता है। और फिर ख़ुसूसन गवर्नमेंट साइड से कुछ बयानात ऐसी आ रही हैं कि जो इर्रेस्पॉन्सिबल हैं। मसलन एक तो अभी इस वक्त बेहतरी ये आई है कि चूँकि अशरफ गनी अफ़गानिस्तान के अंदर इतने ज़्यादा नफ़रत का निशाना बने कि हमारी पोजीशन जो है शुक्र अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह पीछे चली गई, और फिर ख़ुद अमेरिका के ख़िलाफ़ इतने जज्बात इस वक्त ज़ोरों पे हैं कि उसकी वजह से भी हमारे पोजीशन जो है वो हम पीछे चले गए। तो मुझे एक तो ये लगता है कि मामलात इतने ज़्यादा खुश उसलूबी के साथ आगे नहीं बढ़ेंगे, और मुझे इंक्लूसिव गवर्नमेंट का इम्कान बहुत कम नज़र आता है, क्योंकि तालिबान ने जब अमारत इस्लामी अनाउंस कर दी तो उसके बाद उसमें दीगर फरीक़ों की शमूलियत का इम्कान कम होगा। जब वो नहीं होगा तो अमेरिका और वेस्ट उनको तस्लीम नहीं करेंगे। तो एक अभी जो ह्यूमिलिएशन उठानी पड़ी है अमेरिकन प्रेसिडेंट को, ब्रिटिश प्राइम मिनिस्टर को, यूरोपियन हेड ऑफ गवर्नमेंट्स को, तो मेरे ख़्याल में जब थोड़ी सी ये फ़िज़ा ठंडी होगी तो फिर उसका इम्कान यही है कि वो मलबा पाकिस्तान पे गिराएंगे। एक तरफ अफगानिस्तान
सलीम भाई इधर ज़रा रुकते हैं, क्योंकि मैं चाह रहा हूँ कि बाकी जो फरीकैन हैं उनको भी हम ज़रा गुफ्तगू में लाएं। मैं वापस आपके पास आऊँगा। Ambassador Riaz Khokhar, few people in Pakistani history have the kind of experience of diplomacy that you have. You heard, Salim express a degree of maybe less optimism than many others. I would be openly pessimistic, but it's not my panel; it's yours. So I wanted to ask you, Khokhar Saab, just talk us through the particularities and the complexities of recognizing a new government. If the Islamic Emirate is indeed the title and the way forward in Afghanistan, what are the dynamics? How will that work at the UN? Should Pakistan be among the first to recognize it? Should Pakistan wait for others? Should it approach a bloc approach, a regional approach, a global approach? What are the conditions that should be set for accordance of recognition? Just talk to us a little bit about the technicalities of these issues, please, Ambassador Riaz Khokhar. Sir, you'll have to unmute before you speak. Abhi unmute nahi hue aap. There you are. Oh, no, you unmuted for a moment and then muted again. Yeah, now you're good. Okay. Now you're good.
Thank you, Asfar, for inviting me, and Mosharraf, thank you for giving me the floor. The Taliban leaders have just got to Afghanistan, and I think it's patently unfair that the entire world is virtually harassing them. They need time to settle down to form a government. We have known these people, and I think Pakistan has made great contribution in bringing about the Doha talks. And I think here I would like to give credit to this group of Taliban leaders who have shown great diplomatic skill, great political skill, great military skill, and of course a spirit of accommodation. I want to emphasize that they are somewhat different from the previous Taliban leadership. I think this is an important aspect. And so far that they have spoken to the international community, on television networks, etc., they have shown reasonableness, and I think the real test will come when they can match their words with their deeds. So I think it's a bit unfair to put them on the mat from the beginning. On the question of recognition, I think this is a very delicate matter, but clearly Pakistan has got into this sort of framework where we are talking about the broad-based and inclusive government, and human rights and rights of women. And so these are all good things. But you know, the Taliban will feel under tremendous pressure. Now, the technical aspects of recognition are, is the Taliban government in control of its territory? Is the government functioning as is there governance there? Is there the commitments that they have made to the international community about the presence of non-state actors and transnational actors? Will they be able to throw them out or get rid of them? That will take time. Sure, this is not something that they can do in a matter of a week or 10 days. Or it'll take a lot of time, because Afghanistan was the Oxford and Cambridge of all this stuff. So the point I'm trying to labor is give them time. The critical question is,
Excellency, does that mean that Pakistan should withhold recognition until those conditions have been met, or should the recognition come first?
I think the expectation in Kabul would be that we should be one of the first. I think when we recognized the first Taliban government, along with, subsequently with Saudi Arabia and UAE, I think there was a lot of flack that we got. And I think these are things that need to be explained to the Taliban leadership that is in position on a delicate, quiet, diplomatic manner, not publicly. I think what we need to avoid is public statements that can be taken ill in Kabul. For the simple reason, they're a proud people. They've come through a sort of amazing struggle of 20 years. The American Afghanistan project has failed. I don't want to use harsh words about who lost and who got defeated. I think we should avoid that kind of language. It's not fair, because the nerves in Washington are rather sensitive on these issues at the moment.
And the American people are also a proud people.
Exactly. And I think we should respect. It's still the sole superpower. It's still a very strong military power. It's not going anywhere. I mean, physically, the Americans have not been defeated there. It's not a kind of a Waterloo for them. I think these are wrong attitudes. They still remain a major power in the world. At the global level, let me just make my final comment. At the global level, Mosharraf, the game is going to get more complicated, more complex, and it's a game between chess and Go, which is a Chinese board game with multiple complicated moves. So I think this is the way I would put it. I think on the question of recognition, we need to wait. We should not rush in. But by and large, we need consultation with our friends, particularly China and Russia, Central Asian countries, Iran, and of course the countries. And we should not ignore, by the way, we should not ignore contacts with the United States on this subject as well. That look, we are neighbors, we have some difficulties, we have to handle some very critical issues. So we are looking at this question of recognition rather seriously. But let's not rush it.
Fantastic. I'm going to try and loop back to you, because there's a couple of questions that emerged from there. One of them, which I had planned to ask General Lodhi about the likelihood of one of those conditions that you defined, which was around sovereignty and control over territory and denial of space to transnational and regional terrorist groups like the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. But since General Lodhi's connection has been a little bit iffy, Anwar, if you can hear me, the first thing I want you to do, Anwar, is to change the angle of your camera, because right now we see you sideways. So if you could shift there you go. So you can hear me. So the first thing we need is Oh, is it not happening? Okay, so you've tried and it's not happening. Then the second thing I want you to do, Anwar, is to unmute so we can hear you. And I'll just tilt my head a little bit. You're beautiful on both 90 degrees and on 0 degrees. So
thank you.
We'll enjoy the benefit of that view. Now, Anwar, you, of course, you represent Pakistan. You're a senator for Pakistan. So I hate to do the kind of thing where, Andleeb gets asked about women and you get asked about Balochistan. But even though I hate to do it, I am going to actually go ahead and ask you, one of the perspectives or issues that's going to be really important is the way in which this generation of Afghan refugees settles. And there's two questions there. One is about how Pakistan will absorb any new migration wave. And so I'd love to hear your view on what impact a new wave of migration will have on Quetta, on Mastung, on Qila Saifullah, on the various parts of Balochistan that you are familiar with and are from. And the other question I had was what you think the impact of the global Afghan diaspora will be on the politics of the countries in which they go and locate. Because I think that nobody that's leaving Afghanistan today particularly has very good feelings for Pakistan. How will that translate in the long term? Anwar?
Thank you, Mosharraf. I wanted to give a brief background on how do I view a situation, but I'll directly come to the question you have raised. The influx of the new refugees, let me put it that way, I do not see that happening around Balochistan or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa for that matter. Why I'm saying so? The currently internally displaced people are there within the territorial boundaries of Afghanistan. The Taliban have taken the effective control of all the border points. We have got an effective mechanism of the fencing on the Afghan borders. And lastly, to be honest with you, the new influx of the refugees, the people who want to get out of Afghanistan in this situation, does not seem to be more interested to land in Pakistan. And the prime reason appears to me when I see as a Pashtun and someone who can understand Dari also, a lot of social media information is coming out also. Most of them want to land in Europe, US, or Canada in the Western Hemisphere. And that is one of the reasons that the Fortress Europe has to think about. And it's not just the new influx of the refugees. Let's not forget there are 5 million Afghans currently residing, registered, non-registered, in Afghanistan, and over 1 million in Iran, and 500,000 probably in Turkey. So who would differentiate once they land on the shores of the Mediterranean? And if they enter Europe, you cannot appreciate that whether it's a 50 years old Afghan who has been residing in Quetta or Peshawar, or who has just left Kunduz or Kandahar or Rozgan for that matter. So bigger challenge as far as the influx of the refugees is concerned, and there will be a boon of human traffickers. I mean, I've been reading some articles currently on this subject, and people are quite wary, and there are the authorities all over the Europe, particularly because to reach the US is a huge challenge. But Europe is more vulnerable. And this is one of the reasons I think Pakistan should engage EU and use Brussels to cajole London, Washington, both, that a peaceful settlement of a de facto future Afghan government is not just in the interest of the region, but it has its global implications also, not just for the reason of terrorism, but for the reason of illegal immigration, for the reason of which will have social and political implications for the West. How they're going to assimilate in those societies. I mean, it's not that whosoever, I mean, we have been continually accused that there was a sense of jubilation in Pakistan over the takeover of Taliban in Afghanistan. I know for a fact that there has been a sense of jubilation of Afghan origin US citizens, Afghan origin European citizens. Most of them are conservative Pashtuns, though they are residing in East London or West London or maybe in Chicago or LA or whatever. But they do have their sense or a blend of religious nationalism And for them, the same countries which they have adopted as their new homes equally stands as a symbol or which epitomizes as occupational force. So their sense of being an Afghan and a loyal Afghan to their soil, it gets a sense of satisfaction and a sense of accomplishment is there that yes, we are the Afghans, that is the so-called graveyard of empire, so we got rid of them. When they go out in the town, they are very proud Afghan people. And that sense of jubilation is at individual level. I know it's not been articulated at some platform or on an organized forum, but the sense is there. So it is all over the place, the place, not just in Pakistan, Europe, Canada, Australia, anywhere, wherever you find an Afghan or Pakistani, you would see that kind of a sense. But does it translate?
The issue, Anwar, I guess the issue there would be, and if you don't mind, I'd like to bring Andleeb, and then I'd like to go back to Sohail Aman Saab, and then to Salim, and then back to Foreign Secretary Khokhar. This issue, let me pose this to you, Madam Andleeb Abbas. You know, you've been a member of the PTI, and you've known the Prime Minister for decades, and I think that you were right to identify his kind of his vision of an inclusive and conciliatory approach being the only way forward. One of the things that I think many of his critics, including myself, have always given him credit for is that the humaneness of the Prime Minister's approach, not just to domestic affairs, but all over. On the issue of refugees, you know, when he began as Prime Minister, he had said some very interesting things. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity maybe to explain to those who are listening whether the Prime Minister continues to feel strongly about the rights of you know, people who were born in Pakistan in terms of their ownership of Pakistani citizenship or potential for Pakistani citizenship, and more widely, whether this idea of closing the border or sealing the border is one that is consistent with the genetic humaneness that I think is a PTI quality. Maybe you can explain that a little bit as well. Madam Andleeb Abbas, and you'll unmute to begin speaking, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mosharraf. I think this is a very important question and very valid one, because there are two aspects to it. One is, of course, that Afghanistan has always been, you know, it's almost a country that we have always with open arms welcomed them. Pakistan is the only country in the world which has hosted 3.5 million refugees, given them the opportunity that Pakistanis have, and in turn suffered because of that as well. We have suffered because there has been a porous border, you know, there has been terrorism opportunities coming up. It's very difficult for us to find out in 3.5 million people who are with you, against you, who have, you know, connections, who don't have connections. And then you had a porous. We have, over a period of time, realized this conflict, cross-border conflict. We have a fence now over there. We have checkposts over there. And every time, if you remember, we offered Afghanistan that we want to have biometric testing. They refused. They didn't want to have biometric testing. And, you know, 25,000 people crossing the border every day was a big problem for us. So we decided that this time we were prepared for it, that if there is a conflict, our acceptance of the refugees is going to be very, very limited, because we simply do not have the capacity. And instead of creating more problems, the humanity is there, they are brothers. I mean, what more can we say that Afghanistan cricket team is one of the best in the world, and they've all learned cricket from Pakistan, and they acknowledge that as well. We have so much in common with them. But unfortunately, the problem is that for both Afghanistan and for us, if the refugee situation increases and we have to keep hordes and hordes, the internally displaced people plus the refugees pose such a danger to both the countries that we have decided that because we don't have the capacity, we will be very, very careful in any influx that is coming in, number one. Number two, we as a nation which has been termed as the most generous and hospitable nation in the world on refugee sort of acceptance, have looked at the whole picture. It's a wholesome picture. And we realize that a problem that we cannot safeguard, a problem that we cannot ensure, which is basically the crossover over terrorism elements, and of course, housing and giving them the same treatment we gave them so many years ago, because of capacity constraints, we will be very careful in accepting them this time.
Thanks for explaining that. Offline, I'd love to talk to you more about this and maybe try to convince you, because I know that the beating heart of the old school PTI leadership continues to be humanity and compassion, and I know that's what the Prime Minister responds to. And I feel that's my personal view, but we'll park that for later. Thanks so much for responding to that question, madam. Sohail Aman Sahab, when you were speaking earlier, I didn't have a chance to frame my question. I wanted to ask you about the residual material collateral for the Afghan Air Force that the Taliban have now taken over. There's a lot of equipment, US equipment in Afghanistan. The question I had for you was going to be about how that is going to be managed and whether you worry that any of that could fall into the wrong hands and then be used to target Pakistan. And maybe if you'd like to, please do answer that. But your comments earlier have provoked a little bit of thinking at my end, because you're mashallah as a former air chief. I mean, you're a very important voice. And this is of course, I don't speak for Nutshell Group or Corporate Pakistan Group or even for the company I work for. This is my personal view. But when I hear a former air chief sound like he's admiring the Taliban and is happy about the Taliban victory, that worries me a little bit, because I thought we had a pretty good system here in Pakistan. It has its faults. Pakistani federalism and democracy is not perfect. But we have a great system, and we have a wonderful republic that has the potential to be compassionate and to serve its people. Why then would we have anybody in our system, whether former or serving, who would have any kind of admiration for the Taliban? Maybe you'd like to respond to both those questions, Sohail Sahab?
Okay, perfect, Mosharraf. The purpose of these debates is that you threadbare and very honest to speak about things. And when I said was that democracy is possibly, and I was comparing the United States and China, and I said that there can be other systems as well. Democracy is not a one-fit-all solution for everybody. Now, the democracy types could be changed. I mean, the Chinese call that the CMC as their democratic system. But the point is that when we went out and see few of the countries in Africa, they're the chieftains, they have a government, and the entire country is run by those chieftains into the tribes. So what I was saying was that let's not misinterpret. Democracy is one of the best systems, but that's not the only system, number one. And then every country has its own democratic system. For example, if Taliban, that's where I was taking, if Taliban make a broad-based government, as we're saying, an inclusive government, where all the factions, all the important tribes and the communities are represented in the parliament, you call it democracy. And I don't have a difficulty with that at all. So please don't worry on that account. And the only thing I was saying was that democracy is not a one-fit-all solution for everybody. You have to tailor it accordingly. So that clarifies. Weapons. Okay, what happened in Iraq was that these weapons, it's a repeat story. These weapons were absorbed into the homes and they were gone. And my fear is that that's how these weapons, because Taliban, I think it was said by the worthy ambassador, that give them time. They really need to have control over what has gone in, and every area is not 100% in their control. So there could be a percentage of weapons which might just get diluted. go out to the hands which are either side. We're not very sure. But I think we should look at this time a broader perspective and the commitment that the Taliban have given that their soil will not be used for against any other country. And of course, Pakistan is making that point very, very clear. And I think from TTP, we are one of those people who have fought that war. So we exactly understand how dangerous that was, how complicated that was, and we would never like that to happen back to this country again. And that is why those weapons, I'm not sure how many of those will go to wrong hands, but I think eventually Taliban will get a control of the whole thing. About the military that you're talking, I'll make a very brief comment, and it has been quite true. Militaries are not weapons. Militaries are not uniforms. Militaries are the ownership, the patriotism, and the spirit that you fight, and that's how they're an institution. So Taliban will take time for making those military units as institutions. And my take right now on this is that we may not hurry on this, but it will be a very, very, very important task for the Pakistan military to go ahead and finally train them in the best professional manner so that they bring more stability to their country. Thank you, Mosharraf.
Thank you, Sohail Saab. That was really thorough, and I'm really grateful also for the clarification, because as you know, and this is something all Pakistanis, but everybody all over the world should be aware of, is that oftentimes there are people sitting, waiting for the chance to misinterpret the words, especially of very important people. So it's always good to ask again and to give people the opportunity to clarify. Naeem, Lodhi, Saab, Jan Saab, I believe your connection is now stable.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
It's incredibly stable now.
Fantastic. Jan Saab, because time short hai, so I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions. And you'll forgive me for interrupting.
I think that would be fair.
Ji, bilkul. So the first question I had, Jalal Saab, and I'd shared this earlier. I'm really interested in your view of kind of leading on from what Riaz Khokhar had said, and you might not have heard it, so let me just quickly recap. I had asked him about recognition, and so one of the conditions that we should wait to see if it's fulfilled is whether or not Afghanistan can deny terrorist groups, transnational terrorist groups in particular, the space to operate. And of course, the most important one for Pakistan is the TTP. But I would say, given Pakistan's global interests, I think any space for any group, whether it's TTP or Al-Qaeda or Daesh or any other groups, and we can talk about those too, but those three in particular, there should not be any room in Afghanistan for them. Are you optimistic that the Taliban will be able to deliver on this promise, which I know that they've made to us and to the Americans many times in Doha? Are you confident that ye ho payega? Will this actually
including
be...
BLA?
Right.
For sure, absolutely.
I am confident, and I would like to share that why I am confident. Because if we see the attitude of Taliban so far, if you look at the agreement which they signed with the Americans, I think they nearly adhere to that. Whereas we know that Americans did violate the timelines. Then whatever they have said, the way they have given amnesty to the people, the way they are allowing women to demonstrate, the way they are trying their best to make an inclusive government, that is one. And also, once I saw them, very good negotiators, very good generalship, I would say, military strategy, good diplomacy while they were talking to Chinese. And so why should I not believe them once they say that? And if they had made a promise only with Pakistan, I could have been a little wary. But now they have made promise with Russia and China, such great powers, and Iran. So why should they make an exception of Pakistan? So in short, I would say that I am quite hopeful that they will adhere to that. And whereas they may not hand over these people to us, but they will not allow them to operate against us. And the second thing is that RAW and NDS combination was actually making their plans and facilitating them to come across and do all these things, and that facilitation will be no more there. So I'm quite possible that all their operations will go down, and within months I think we'll be seeing rather peaceful Pakistan also, if of course peace prevails in Afghanistan. Ji.
Wonderful, Judge Saab. Let me quickly come back to you, but I want to take the conversation to Salim Bhai again. Salim Bhai, there's obviously, I think, well-founded optimism, and you also had a chance to hear Sohail Saab's sort of, clarification, Andleeb Sahiba's response to the question on refugees. My own sense is that we should not be this optimistic for a couple of reasons, and the biggest reason, Salim Bhai, is that mujhe lagta hai that the people who are angry with Pakistan, and there's a big group, there's the Americans, some Europeans, then there's a lot of Afghans, not all Afghans, like Anwar Bhai said, there's a lot of Afghans that are happy, but there's a lot of Afghans that are very unhappy, and most of those Afghans are going to be settled in the West. And we've already seen a little bit of disinformation. Salim Bhai, you might have seen Lara Logan ne ek tasveer tweet ki thi, where a governor who had submitted to the Taliban, he was, she had claimed that he'd been executed. So there'll be a lot of the disinformation, and there'll be a lot of accidents and misgivings that will happen. Pakistan is very vulnerable. How would you respond to that? Do you think I'm being too pessimistic? And is there a way that Pakistan can respond to all these challenges adequately? Salim Bhai.
देखिए मुशर्रफ, एक बात तो ये है कि आपने बिल्कुल दुरुस्त फरमाया कि बहुत सारी डिसइंफॉर्मेशन भी है और दोनों साइड से मुख्तलिफ तरह की कैंपेन भी हो रही है, और मैं इसलिए बार बार ये गुजारिश कर रहा हूँ कि ना जश्न मनाना चाहिए और ना मातम करना चाहिए. लेट्स सी के ऊन किस करवट बैठता है. दूसरा, ये जो हमें कुछ माशरती हवालों से चेंजेस नज़र आते हैं, तो ये भी उनकी गवर्नमेंट की तश्कील के बाद. देखिए, तालिबान में भी मुख्तलिफ लहरें हैं. अब एक तरफ ये जो हमारे साथ इंटरेक्ट करते हैं, जो कतर में थे, ये तो उनके पॉलिटिकल फेसेस हैं. दूसरा, जो ग्राउंड पे उनके लोग थे, उनके और इनके अप्रोच में भी बहुत ज़्यादा फ़र्क होता है. फिर साउथ और जो नॉर्थ या ईस्ट के तालिबान हैं, उनके अप्रोच में भी फ़र्क होता है बहुत ज़्यादा. हमने हर मामले पे उनके यहाँ फ़र्क देखा है. फिर आपने देखा कि इस मरतबा हज़ारा कम्युनिटी के साथ बहुत अच्छा सलूक क्यों हुआ, क्योंकि सबसे पहले काबुल में क़य्यूम ज़ाकिर और उनके लोग दाखिल हुए थे, और क़य्यूम ज़ाकिर जो है वो ईरान के बहुत ज़्यादा करीब हैं और पाकिस्तान से बहुत नाराज़ हैं. वो तालिबान के ऐसे कमांडर हैं. तो अब एक तो ये देखना होगा कि जो वो हुकूमत तश्कील पाते हैं, उसमें पॉलिटिकल फेसेस ड्राइविंग सीट पे आते हैं या उसमें उनके मिलिट्री कमांडर ड्राइविंग सीट पे आते हैं. दूसरा, किस तरह के लोग ड्राइविंग सीट पे आते हैं कि जो किसके ज़्यादा ज़ेर असर हैं. लेकिन तीसरी जो सबसे बड़ी, ये तो सोशल चीज़ें कुछ इस तरह उन्होंने की है. अब ये लोधी साहब ने बिल्कुल दुरुस्त फरमाया कि तालिबान की डिप्लोमेसी, मैंने तो उस रोज़ कहा था कि हमारे वज़ीर ख़ारजा और प्राइम मिनिस्टर को उनके यहाँ ट्रेनिंग के लिए भेजना चाहिए, या हमारे तर्जुमानों को उनके तर्जुमानों के यहाँ ट्रेनिंग के लिए भेजना चाहिए कंधार कुछ अरसे के लिए. लेकिन अच्छी डिप्लोमेसी होने का, मसलन ईरानी डिप्लोमेसी और इंटेलिजेंस दोनों में ईरानियों का कोई सानी नहीं है, लेकिन वो इस बात का सबूत नहीं है कि ईरान जो है वो एक लिबरल कौम है या फिर वेस्टर्न डेमोक्रेसी के मायारात पे उनकी डेमोक्रेसी पूरी उतरती है. तो एक तो इन चीज़ों का इंतज़ार करना चाहिए. लेकिन असल जो बेसिक क्वेश्चन है, देखें, पाकिस्तान ने मॉस्को में जो ट्राइका प्लस है मार्च में, उसमें चीन, रूस और अमेरिका के साथ मिलके उस आलानिये पे दस्तखत किए हैं जिसमें कहा गया था कि वो अब तालिबान के अमारत इस्लामी को तस्लीम नहीं करेंगे. अब तालिबान ने तो अमारत इस्लामी का ऐलान कर दिया. तो एक तो ये है कि अब पाकिस्तान क्या करेगा, ये सवाल. दूसरा, अमेरिका तो उनकी अमारत इस्लामी और इसको नहीं तस्लीम करेगा, सैंक्शंस होंगी, बाकी चीज़ें होंगी. तो रिफ्यूजीज़ हो सकता है कि जंगी रिफ्यूजीज़ ना हो, या फिर उसी तरह के तालिबान के निज़ाम से तंग रिफ्यूजीज़ ना हो, लेकिन माशी रिफ्यूजीज़ आपकी पाकिस्तान की तरफ आने लगे भी हैं. और आप तो बाकी लोगों तो छोड़ें, मैं नाम नहीं ले सकता, मुझे उनके क्रिकेट टीम के 3 बंदों ने मुझसे रब्ता किया है कि भाई हम अफगानिस्तान छोड़ना चाहते हैं, हमारे साथ कुछ करें. ये काबुल एयरपोर्ट के सामने क्या हो रहा है, अभी तो हमारा बॉर्डर भी बंद है. अच्छा, दूसरी चीज़, आपके साथ पिछली अफगान हुकूमत ये कर रही थी छेड़खानी कि हम ये नहीं मानते, वो नहीं मानते, लेकिन कोविड के SOPs को तो मानते थे. अब उस रोज़ चाइनीज़ वो चमन बॉर्डर पे क्या हुआ, तालिबान ने कहा हमने वीज़े की शर्त उनके लिए ख़त्म कर ली, लेकिन पाकिस्तान ने कहा कि एटलीस्ट आपके पास कोई डॉक्यूमेंट्स होना चाहिए। उधर तालिबान ने कहा नहीं, आप हमसे कोई डॉक्यूमेंट नहीं मानेंगे, और कोरोना को तो हम मानते ही नहीं है, जिसकी वजह से हमें फिर बॉर्डर बंद करना पड़ा। तो अभी इसलिए मैं कहता हूं कि कुछ इंतज़ार करना चाहिए, और फिर जब उन्होंने इमारत इस्लामी अनाउंस कर दी तो इंक्लूसिव गवर्नमेंट या दीगर कौमियतों का उसमें शमूलियत, वो अब मुझे मुमकिन नज़र नहीं आता। जब वो नज़र नहीं आएगा तो फिर आप अंदाज़ा लगा सकते हैं कि आगे क्या होगा।
Sure, absolutely. I think the great points. Jan Saab, since you've not, we haven't had a chance to hear you, I'll come directly back to you, and then I'll take this question to the other panelists as well. Khokhar Saab, I'll come to you, and then I'll come to you, Anwar, and then we'll go back to Andleeb one final time before we wrap up. Jan Saab, this question of recognition, which I raised originally with Riaz Khokhar Saab and that Salim has alluded to, is it also possible that there are spoilers in the mix? And to me, one of the great spoilers that doesn't get enough attention in Pakistan is Iran. There have been multiple other cases, but we won't go into those. In this case, is it possible that Iran is propping up and prompting and advocating and encouraging the Taliban to take a direction that is contrary to the Doha process, and thereby solidifying its influence and concurrently limiting the influence not just of Pakistan or of China or of the US, but of all these countries, making Tehran more important globally? Is that too grand a conspiracy theory? Because what else would explain the jaldbazi, the urgency that has caused the recognition, or rather the declaration of the emirate by the Doha Shura in Kabul?
Thank you very much. In fact, to tell you honestly, I do not have any information or any indication where I can suggest what you are saying, that Iran is trying to be a spoiler. Whereas the two main spoilers are very evident. In my opinion, America is the number one spoiler, who would not like that there should be peace in Afghanistan and they should settle down. And of course, we know that India is a spoiler. I would rather say that about recognition, that Pakistan should not jump the gun and should not be the first one alone to recognize them. But we should also not stay behind once the group of Russia, China, Iran, Central Asian countries, and us. We may be the part of first group, but we may not be the first one, and we may not be looking at America and UK and others that wait for them and they recognize and then we will recognize. I also want to bring out a small thing. If in any country, any third world country, if you announce that you can go to America, you can go to UK without visa and without any fare, free ride, you will get a free ride. You will see scenes much more serious than what is happening at Kabul airport. So we should not forget that one. This is a phenomenon, and I think Safi Saab alluded it correctly, that there are economic reasons also that people would like to go. And one more thing I would like to add, this is my assessment, I can be wrong. In my opinion, any future dispensation in Afghanistan will be, for us, will be better than Ashraf Ghani, because Ashraf Ghani gave space to RAW, gave space to other intelligence agencies, and shed a lot of blood of Pakistan. So I'm quite confident that any future dispensation will be much better than Ashraf Ghani.
General Saab, that's I think very clear views, and I'm grateful that you mentioned particularly India. I'm not sure I agree that the US is a spoiler, but we can always have debates and disagreements. Anwar, this issue of economic trouble in Afghanistan, this is not an issue of the future or a speculation. Salim Safi is quite right. Not only is there going to be further economic hardship, but we already know that the US has frozen the assets of the Afghan government, and the central bank will not be able to access their foreign exchange reserves. All of this will mean that very soon, within a few days to a few weeks, you're going to see a change in the supply chain. In the amount of trucks that go through Torkham into Afghanistan to supply Afghanistan with the essentials that it needs for day-to-day life. If that's the case, how would you propose that Pakistan can help Afghanistan? Because Pakistan, as you know, itself is not exactly an economic superpower. The threat of sanctions on Afghanistan, the reality of what's already happened, will create an economic crisis, will it not, Anwar?
Well, in a way, I absolutely agree with your assessment in terms of query which you have put to me. How Pakistan should respond is more important. We need to have a clear roadmap, which, in terms of phase-wise, that initially let's agree within the region that there is a need that if there is a de facto government, which Taliban appears to be one, there has to be an engagement on humanitarian level, like supply of medicines, supply of food, so on and so forth. And that de facto interstate relationship could, in the next phase, could be taken for a formal recognition, and how it would benefit the region. It requires to generate a narrative on that and link it with the global community phase-wise, that how it would suit their interest and their perspective. Look, there is a so-called sense of humiliation in the United States where they have not lost the war, but there still is a sense of withdrawal, humiliation, whatever you call it, and there is a severe domestic criticism also, be it in Europe or in the US. We in the region, Pakistan can take lead on that so-called sense of humiliation could be addressed as a sense of ease. While I'm saying a sense of ease, that let's not just put a criticism from our side, that is Pakistani side, to the global players, particularly US and EU, because we're not going to achieve anything. And they will not achieve anything either after squandering $2 trillion and wastage of the presence of 2 decades. Let the sanity prevail and empathy for Afghans, which should be the primacy in whatever narrative we generate. Afghans deserve peace, first and foremost. Next to them is Pakistan. Afghans have suffered for 5 decades. Their 5 generations have seen orphanage. They have seen displacement. They have seen there is a cultural and civilizational onslaught in Afghanistan. If you go and observe and see even the settled families in the West, be it in Europe or in the US, they have not in a manner been assimilated in those cultures as probably they want. There is an identity crisis over there as well. So Afghans have lost in every sense of the word. They have lost their territory to 3 major powers in 50 years. They have lost their sense of identity. They have got a confused sense of identity for their offspring. There is so much which is at stake for Afghans. So they deserve far better than anyone and everyone.
Thank
then
you.
It is for the region.
Anwar, just because
region.
If you forgive me, and you always do, you're very kind. If you forgive me for interrupting, just because the panel is already over time, and I do want to get Riaz Khokhar and Andleeb Abbas's views before I hand over to Asfar. Khokhar, I have a similar sort of complaint or shikayat, which you have spoiled me over the years, so मैं आपके साथ कर सकता हूँ. As I did with Sohail Aman Saab. One thing you said that popped out at me, and it will pop out at others, is, you call the Taliban struggle amazing. And I think I know what you're talking about, but I want you to explain it a little bit further. I also wonder if it's useful. Nobody is better equipped, Khokhar Saab, to explain why so many senior Pakistani officials may not be excited about a Taliban takeover, but are definitely so sick and tired of being blamed by the US and the US press that there's a certain sense of maybe suppressed joy at watching the US really struggle. Maybe you can explain why that is the case, because the American version is, and by the way, that's the version of a lot of Pakistanis too, because they don't really get to consume as much Pakistani media as US or Western media. But the Western version is that, Pakistan was supporting the Taliban and supporting the US at the same time. And that's why this whole thing happened the way that it did. So if you could give a very brief history lesson, and by brief, I mean really brief, because I do want to go to Andleeb, but I thought it would be useful to set the context of what you were saying about the Taliban sort of ascendancy in Afghanistan. Khokhar.
Well, I really meant that they have genuinely struggled. Their strategies were very good, diplomatic, political, and of course their public relations. I'm not trying to take any vicarious pleasure out of America's difficulties or the bloom that has affected the think tank community. But this is what I meant is that think tanks will be spending hours and weeks and months and years studying what exactly happened. Why, for instance, the Afghan army dissolved is basically because it was, for almost a decade we have been telling the Americans that forming an Afghan army is not be in the interest of Afghanistan and for anybody else. In fact, General Kiani, I think credit should be given to General Kiani. He submitted 3 notes to the Americans, including one which he handed over to Obama, saying this is not going to work. This is going to be, because of their sectarian, ethnic, religion, all sorts of issues that go in, because they've never really had that kind of an army before. And secondly, the cause. The Taliban succeeded for 2 reasons. One, they had a cause. They were fighting for the freedom of their country and wanting the occupation forces to go. And secondly, they had definitely had some degree of support in the rural areas. Otherwise, a movement of that cannot go as far as Kabul. So I think that's the factor. The third point I wanted to make is that the narrative in the West is not going to die down against Pakistan. The narrative is going to get traction because they have now started actually believing in it, that Pakistan has been double dealing and, whatever other expressions you want to use for it. So we've got a task cut out for us. We have to work very hard in Washington, in several capitals in Europe and other places. And I think you made a good suggestion at one time, if I'm not mistaken, I read it somewhere, that the government of Pakistan, the present government of Pakistan, need to broaden this business of dealing with foreign policy and security policy by involving other people. I mean, there are lots. Sherry, for instance, made an excellent presentation here, or Hina, or there are so many other people who can actually go out and explain. We need to market. Our marketing is very, very sad, unfortunately. And our ambassadors have some limitations. Now, one more point I wanted to make is, you will see stability in Afghanistan only if there is no opposition being created, and opposition is being created in the north. The Saleh and Ahmad Masood and all, and depending on who's going to be backing them. So the question is that the question of refugees, which was addressed by my good friend, the senator, will be critical, because if there is instability, if there is civil war, then you will see that the pressure on Pakistan on the question of refugees will increase. And one more point I wanted to make, I think, is please don't forget, Afghanistan is polarized. There are some people who love Pakistan, and there are also those who do not. And we've had a sort of an benign adversarial relationship. It should not be forgotten. So I would say that we'll have to do some fresh thinking on the refugee issue. Because if you keep the wires or whatever it's called and build walls like Trump did in Mexico, this will not stop. If the pressure in the situation in Afghanistan deteriorates, you can be sure they will be heading for Pakistan. Where else can they go? They will head to Afghanistan, to Iran, and to Pakistan. These will be the two principal points. And there is a natural expectation on their part that we can go to Pakistan. That is the way I want to put it. So I think our government needs to inject some fresh thinking and also not swallow everything that they are being fed by Western capitals. I think this is important. Even this word inclusive, I personally don't like. I think broad-based is good enough. Inclusive means what? Every single party? Does it mean, do we have an inclusive system in Pakistan? I mean, there is a big issue here. Even in Pakistan, there is a big issue. We have a government, yes. We are some sort of a democracy. But as you know, there is a big issue in Pakistan on the system, whether it will survive or not, or all sorts of issues are there. So I finally wanted to just conclude on this thing. I do hope that the Taliban manage to stabilize, but I do share Salim Sahafi Saab, for whom I have great respect. I hear him with great attention. I think there are very serious complications. There are no simple sums here. So let's give them time and breathing space.
I think I'm so glad that I asked you those questions, Khokhar Saab, and I'm so happy that you were part of this conversation. I share that sentiment about everyone, but in particular, I've learned so much from you about the business of diplomacy and statecraft, and this was another masterclass. So really, really useful intervention and responses, and I hope I'm glad this is being recorded because this should be used by others. Before I ask Andleeb to maybe give a summation of her perspectives and maybe also share with us what she might take back to the foreign minister and to the prime minister in terms of what she has gathered from this conversation with such great panelists, I wanted to quickly ask if General Lodhi, if you had any final very quick thoughts, or Salim Safi, if you wanted to share any quick thoughts, or Sohail Aman Saab, if you wanted to share any quick thoughts. Starting with General Lodhi.
Thank you very much. I think our options are dependent on the emerging scenarios, and we must be ready. As we normally say that hope for the best and prepare for the worst. But I would suggest that we should also prepare for the best, because if the good scenario emerges, I don't think we are really ready to take advantage of all the opportunities which will come up. Thank you.
Wonderful. Salim bhai, koi aakhri jo hai, some thoughts as a sum up from what you've heard and what you wanted to say.
मुशर्रफ, जिस तरह मैंने अर्ज़ किया कि देखिए अफगानिस्तान में तो दोनों पॉसिबिलिटीज़ हैं, और बहरहाल तालिबान के लिए तो अच्छा वक्त उनके हिसाब से आ गया। अगर वर्स्ट होगा तो हमारे ऊपर वर्स्ट असरात पड़ेंगे, लेकिन अफगानिस्तान में अच्छा हो या बुरा हो, एक चीज़ के लिए हमें तैयार रहना चाहिए, और वो है अमेरिका और उसके इत्तेहादियों की तरफ से पाकिस्तान के बाजू मरोड़ने का। अगर ज़्यादा खराबी हुई तो ज़्यादा शिद्दत के साथ मरोड़ेंगे, लेकिन अगर अल्लाह करे अफगानिस्तान में कोई मौजज़ाना तौर पर स्टेबिलिटी आई तो फिर भी वो हमें माफ़ नहीं करेंगे, लेकिन शायद फिर हाथ मरोड़ने में तो थोड़ा सा गुजारे से काम करें।
थैंक यू सलीम भाई। सोहेल अमान साहब।
जी मुशर्रफ, दो बहुत छोटी सी बातें हैं। जब भी कभी किसी में कुछ तनाव हो जाए और सुलह करनी हो तो सिर्फ चीज़ों को सेट असाइड करना पड़ता है और उसको नया स्टार्ट लेना पड़ता है। हमें अफगानिस्तान में जहाँ पे भी रंजिशें हैं वहाँ पे एक्सेस करके और इन तमाम को जो है, आई अंडरस्टैंड ब्रॉड बेस्ड गवर्नमेंट बनाना मुश्किल काम है, देयर इज अ बिग चैलेंज, लेकिन हमें मैक्सिमम इसको ईज आउट करना है और सपोर्ट करना है। दैट्स वन पॉइंट। और दूसरा ये है कि हमें पाकिस्तान के अंदर अपनी आंखें बहुत एहतियात से खुली रखने की जरूरत है। उसको माइबियोस इंटेलिजेंस बेस्ड ऑपरेशंस कहते हैं। इंडिया के ये बड़ा मुश्किल होगा इस सब चीज को एब्जॉर्ब करना, where their entire strategy has come in. So I think we need to support Taliban establish a peaceful government, inshallah, and also be very very careful that हमारे मुल्क के अंदर stability और security maintain रहे. Thank you.
Last and definitely the most, Andleeb Abbas, some final thoughts from you before I hand over to Asfar. Ji, we can hear you.
Ji, can you hear me?
Ji, loud and clear, please.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mosharraf, and it's been a very, very enlightening and enriching conversation. I think I have learned a lot, and I think my government will really benefit by it. I think the three main points that have come out, and they're all very valid points. Number one, there should be no favorites. We should go with an open mind. We should not be inclined towards this or that. We should be, and that's what we are trying to do, push for an inclusive, broad-based government and not jump the queue and jump the gun, as some of our participants very rightly pointed out, number one. Number two, this is not the end, this is the beginning. And the beginning is about the post-takeover era, which involves forming of the government, which involves the refugee problem, which also involves the humanitarian trauma which may come up because of lack of supplies, lack of finances, and lack of opportunities over there. And lastly, but not the least, I think Pakistan's main problem, and that's, I think, where we need help, and we would welcome this suggestion from everybody to help us over there, is basically the problem of really coming up with a situation which talks about not just about the narrative building, but the victim blaming that we are going to be facing. There are spoilers. India is a big spoiler, and US is facing a problem because US needs a scapegoat. So that's where we need help, narrative building. We need help in pushing up a case, as Ambassador put up very rightly, on the marketing side of it. Pakistan as the compassionate, open, peace-loving nation, rather than what we have been used to. And I think that's where we will be moving towards. So I thank all of you for this wonderful session.
Thank you so much, Madam Andleeb Abbas. Asfar, I don't need to tell you what a brilliant panel you put together, but you just saw evidence of that with such fantastic contributions from everyone. So congratulations to you, Asfar, and to your whole team at Nutshell for convening this wonderful, wonderful panel. Thank you.
Thank you.